please go to finneganswakeNotes.net for a full explanation of the text, and please don't forget to hit the like button.
Welcome to episode 26 of the Reading Finnegans Wake's in 200 Sessions podcast, where we analyze Finnegans Wake by James Joyce, 3 pages at a time. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us. Right, that's the formal bit done. Now, let's get straight into it, our deep dive into the next 3 pages, 84.28 to 86.31. We're really shifting here, aren't we? Moving away from the more, abstract assaults and getting into something very concrete, very detailed.
Yeah, these pages are incredibly dense. It feels like Joyce is taking that recurring theme, the whole HCE under attack thing, and really distilling it. We get 2 very distinct but connected scenes.
Right. First, this sort of near-miss ambush on HCE himself, which gets surprisingly political and, well, pretty vulgar too.
Exactly. And then, boom, we pivot straight into this completely farcical trial. But it's not HCE in the dock, it's this other character, Festy King, a surrogate.
Okay, so our goal here for you listening is to try and unpack how Joyce is weaving all these threads together. You've got specific Dublin locations, bits of Roman law, nods to anarchism, Irish history, and even basic bodily functions.
Mm-hmm.
And it all seems to feed into these 2 stories, mistaken identity, legal injustice. We really need to figure out how HCE, the supposed victim, and Festy King, the accused, are almost like 2 sides of the same coin.
That's the core of it, I think. It's where let's say, the private shame or sin becomes this big public prosecution. These pages really capture that central idea in the Wake, this endless cycle of guilt, accusation, and the constant hunt for a scapegoat.
Sounds like a lot to get through.
It is. The density is pretty staggering sometimes.
Yeah.
But the payoff, the understanding you get, is definitely worth digging in.
All right, let's start where Joyce starts is right in the beginning of this section. We get this reference to Ancestry, setting the scene for HCE's near ambush. It talks about our Forebear, Don De Dunelli. Who exactly is this guy supposed to be?
Well, Forebear obviously points to an ancestor, right? It's HCE, but in this kind of foundational ancestral form. But Don De Dunelli, that name itself, it layers things quite cleverly.
Also.
The Dunelli part, that seems to be a nod to a real person, a bass singer in Dublin named Dunn. So straight away, this grand, almost mythic ancestor figure is grounded in, actual local Dublin life.
Okay, makes sense. And the Eldon bit, is that just Don Juan?
It is Don Juan, the sort of universal lover archetype, yeah. But Joyce often digs into, obscure dialects to add another layer. Here, it seems to be Venetian Italian, Don De Dunelli.
Which means?
It means the gift of women. So this ancestor isn't just a singer, he's this archetypal male, defined by his reputation with women, his public persona. It's complex from the get-go. You've got the Dublin singer, the universal lover, the patriarch, all rolled into one and mapped onto HCE.
Right, and this ancestor figure comes with this really strange curse, doesn't he? Something about a ship.
Yeah. May his ship thick stick in the bottle of the river, and all his cruisers stock locked in the Burl of the seas. It's quite visual.
It is. It sounds naval, but also structural. What's going on there?
Well, on the surface, it's a curse, wishing his actual ship gets stuck fast in the river mud. But the word bottle, that immediately brings up the image of a ship in a bottle, right? That impossible decorative object.
Ah, okay. So it's like HCE's whole existence, or maybe his story, the book itself, is trapped, bottled up, but still on show.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. It suggests a kind of paralysis, being stuck. And then there's that bit about lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah, he breaks that phrase up. Cruisers stock locked in the Burl.
Right. Lock, stock, and barrel usually means completely, the whole thing. By splitting it and applying it to the cruisers, his crew, his whole operation, maybe even his family, it suggests total immobilization. Not just the ship, but everything connected to him is stuck, trapped. It's a really comprehensive curse, stopping that cycle of life and story he represents.
That sense of being trapped, immobilized, it kind of sets a weird tone for what comes next, which is this almost bizarre political argument. The text mentions the question of Boney's unlawfully obtaining a pierced paraflam and claptrap fireguard. So we jump from this ancestral curse to Napoleon Bonaparte Boney and an illegal fireplace vendor. It seems absurd.
It is absurd on the surface, and that's the point, I think. You have to notice the scale shift. Why would anyone be arguing over a fireplace accessory? A claptrap fireguard sounds cheap and nasty, but the key is bony.
Napoleon.
Exactly. Napoleon, who was, of course, a prisoner of the British after Waterloo. So suddenly, this isn't just about some dodgy homeware. It becomes intensely political. How could he unlawfully obtain anything under British watch?
Okay, but how does a fire guard become political or even potentially dangerous?
You have to look at the words themselves. Paraflam. It relates to the Italian parafuoco, which means fender, and flam, flames. So, fire guard. But given the context, Napoleon, British imprisonment, the suggestion hinted at in the source material is that it might mean something else entirely. Military.
Like a weapon component.
Possibly. A pierced paraflam or a smokeless tube that could easily be read as part of a musket, or maybe even some kind of early machine gun part. Remember, British law would absolutely forbid Bonaparte from having anything like that.
Right, so the accusation isn't really about pinching a fender from a fireplace.
No.
It's more like accusing him, or maybe HCE by association, of trying to get hold of forbidden weaponry, arming the enemy.
Precisely. It bumps the whole thing up from petty theft to something like treason or conspiracy, and it highlights HC's own ambiguous position. Is he loyal to the crown, or is he secretly some kind of revolutionary sympathizer like Napoleon, dabbling in forbidden tech? The beauty of it is the ambiguity.
It could be either a fender or a firearm part.
Exactly. The accusation is slippery. It means HCE can kind of be condemned, whatever the answer is. It's designed to trap him.
And this sort of abstract political threat then becomes very, very real, physically real. The text says HCE was within the black of your toenail, of being mistakenly ambushed.
Yeah, incredibly close, a near miss. And the attacker is identified very specifically.
The Huguenot heckler with the Peter the Painter. What on earth is a Peter the Painter? Sounds like a children's book character.
It really doesn't sound threatening, does it? But this is one of Joyce's most direct and frankly quite chilling uses of recent history. Peter the Painter wasn't a person in this context. It was the nickname for a specific gun.
A gun.
Yes, a German Mauser C96 automatic pistol, a pretty advanced weapon for the time. And it got that nickname from a real person, Peter Piatkow, who was a Latvian anarchist.
Okay, wait. This connects to that famous event in London, doesn't it? The Siege of Sydney Street.
Absolutely. 1911. Piatkow, sometimes called Peter the Painter, was allegedly involved with the anarchist group that had a massive, very public shootout with police and even soldiers in London's East End. That specific gun, the Mauser pistol, became notorious because of it.
So, calling the weapon Peter the Painter immediately links HCE's near ambush to, well, to real-world lethal political violence.
Anarchism.
Exactly. Joyce places HCE right in the middle of that early 20th century chaos. That recurring motif of him being assaulted gets grounded in actual European political turmoil. And the attacker's aim was simple.
Yeah.
To hole him.
Meaning?
To put a hole in him, literally shoot him. Or, keeping that naval metaphor going from the curse, maybe to hole him like you'd hole a ship below the waterline. To sink him.
So he's nearly assassinated by someone wielding a symbol of modern anarchist terror. How does HCE react, or how is his reaction framed?
He, or the narrative voice defending him, claims he was simply consistently practicing the first of the primary and imprescriptible liberties of the Pacific subject.
That sounds very grand and legalistic. Imprescriptible liberties. It is. Imprescriptible rights are those fundamental rights that supposedly cannot be taken away by any government or law. Think life, liberty, that sort of thing. So HCE is basically claiming he was just minding his own business, being a good, peaceful, law-abiding citizen.
There's an irony there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Especially in Dublin.
Huge irony. Dublin's own coat of arms has the motto, Obedientia civium urbis felicitas.
Which means?
The obedience of the citizens is the happiness of the city. So HCE is positioning himself as the perfectly obedient citizen, the ideal Dubliner, yet he's nearly gunned down while supposedly just exercising his basic rights. It highlights the danger lurking even for the seemingly compliant.
But knowing HCE, the reality of what he was actually doing is probably noble. Where was he and what was he up to? It mentions unprohibited cemetery through forts.
Okay, so the location seems to be Wellington Park Road. That's in Phoenix Park, near the Viceregal Lodge, the heart of British administration in Ireland. Now, unprohibited cemetery through forts is a classic Joycean mashup.
Unprohibited thoroughfares.
Yes, but mixed with cemetery. So he's in a public space, a park road, but it's also coded as a place of death, a cemetery. Phoenix Park itself, of course, was the site of infamous political assassinations, the Invincibles, in 1882. So the place itself is loaded. It's public, but also dangerous, historical.
And the things he was carrying, they seem just as loaded with meaning.
Definitely. His accessories are key. Under his arm, his ox to armpit, he has a Quaker's quack nostrum.
A quack remedy, like snake oil.
Pretty much. It suggests he's involved in something dubious, maybe selling false promises or remedies, deception. And then he's carrying his alpenstock, basically a walking stick or staff in his red hand.
Okay, the red hand, that immediately rings bells. Ulster?
Absolutely. The red hand of Ulster is a major heraldic symbol deeply tied to Northern Irish identity and politics. So carrying his stick in his red hand could be HCE staking a claim to that heritage, that identity.
But red-handed also means...
Caught in the act. Guilty. So in that single image, he's simultaneously asserting a kind of noble regional identity and carrying the literal mark of a criminal caught doing something wrong. It's perfectly ambiguous. The dodgy remedy, the symbolic stick it all suggests his whole Pacific subject, obedient citizen act might just be a cover.
Which leads us perfectly into the climax of this first scene. The moment he nearly gets shot is right when he's about to perform. Exercise number 2.
Yes, and this is where Joyce just slams together the highfalutin and the earthy. HCE is apparently on the verge of performing number 2 of our Acta Legitima Plebea.
That sounds incredibly important. Acta Legitima Plebea, what is that?
It sounds like some official Roman legal record, maybe the daily record of the lawful public acts of the common people, but as far as scholars can tell, it's completely made up by Joyce. It sounds legitimate, but it doesn't actually exist.
Okay, so it's pseudo-legal jargon, but the act itself, number 2, that's not exactly subtle, is it?
No. It's nursery talk for defecation. So HCE's grand, legally framed public act, the very thing he's doing that proves he's a peaceful citizen exercising his rights, is taking a crap in public.
Where exactly is he doing this?
Yeah.
The location seems crucial again.
It is. He's performing this highly commendable public act. The irony is thick here. Upon a public seat. To what? Bear by butts, most easterly, but all goes west, of Blackpool bridges.
Right, Butt Bridge. That pins it down geographically in Dublin.
Instantly. Butt Bridge for a long time was the furthest east road bridge across the Liffey in Dublin. And Bear by Butts, well, that pretty much confirms his state of undress on this public seat. But the geography gives us that crucial phrase, all goes west.
What does that imply?
It's got multiple layers, as usual. First, go west is an old idiom for dying or failing or being ruined, so connects to his near-death experience.
Yeah.
Second, geographically, Dublin's prevailing winds often blow from the east or southeast, meaning they blow up the Liffey towards the west.
So the smell, the evidence of his public act would travel westward across the city.
Exactly. His very private, very base act becomes a public nuisance, broadcast by the wind. And maybe a third layer going west could hint at escape, America maybe, fleeing the consequences. This act, this public defecation near the eastern edge of the city, feels like the hidden crime, the original sin that the whole system now needs to deal with, but by prosecuting someone else.
And his feeling about surviving the ambush?
Yeah.
He was right jolly well pleased at having other people's weather.
Yeah, that's an old-fashioned, almost stage English phrase, meaning pleased to have escaped someone else's misfortune or bad weather. He's glad he missed the bullet, the wrath-bereaved ringdove, as the text calls the potential danger. But other people's weather. Could that also mean he's pleased that the consequences of his own act, the metaphorical bad weather, the stink, are now going to fall on someone else?
Interesting. And that final image, the fear-stung boa constrictor.
That's curious. A boa constrictor, a powerful snake, but it's fear-stung. It implies it only strikes out of fear, not aggression. Perhaps suggesting HCE himself isn't the real aggressor here. He's reacting defensively in a world that feels threatening. It adds to the ambiguity, is he victim or perpetrator?
So to sum up this first part, HCE, carrying all these symbols of guilt and dubious intentions, narrowly avoids being assassinated while in the middle of a pretty disgusting public act, an act that metaphorically pollutes the city. And this hidden act now needs to be addressed, but not by punishing HCE directly.
Exactly. That's the setup. The private shame has occurred. The public system needs a response. But HCE, the central figure, seems Teflon-coated. He escapes. So the system has to generate a substitute, a double, a fetch, as the text will call it. Someone needs to take the fall for what happened near Butt Bridge. The trial must happen, but it's destined to be a farce.
And the transition is right there in the text. But to return to the Atlantic and Phoenicia proper, which sounds like, let's get back to the main story and finish it properly. Connecting back to the sea, the chaos.
That seems right. And immediately, we meet the person who's going to carry the cam, Festy King.
Tell us about him. The introduction is packed with detail. He's a child of Mayo, lives in Mayo of the Saxons, family linked to tar and feather industries. This feels loaded.
It's incredibly loaded. This isn't just random color. It's a direct anchor into a specific traumatic piece of Irish history. Mayo, tar, and feathering. It all points one way.
Which is?
The Maamtrasna murders. This was a horrific event in 1882 in County Galway near Mam. A family was murdered, and the subsequent investigation and trial were a notorious miscarriage of justice. Several men were convicted, some executed, based on flimsy evidence, and crucially, through a legal process conducted entirely in English.
And one of the executed men, Miles Joyce, couldn't even speak English, could he?
That's the heart of the tragedy, and Joyce himself wrote passionately about it. Miles Joyce spoke only Irish. He was tried, condemned, and hanged based on testimony he couldn't understand, translated poorly by questionable interpreters. He became a symbol of how British law could crush the Irish-speaking population, how justice could be completely subverted by language and politics.
So, by making Festy King a child of Mam, Joyce is signaling.
He's signaling that King is a stand-in for Miles Joyce. He represents that systemic injustice, the way the legal system can railroad someone, especially someone marginalized by language or class when it needs a conviction. The trial we're about to see is shadowed by Maamtrasna.
And King is brought before the court, hailed up at the Old Bailey, which is London's main criminal court, standing in for Dublin, I suppose.
Seems likely, yeah, a sort of generic symbol of high justice. And the timing is symbolic, too, on the calends of Mars.
March 1st.
Right. The first day of March in the old Roman calendar. It was their new year, tied to the start of spring, the vernal equinox. Giving the trial this date suggests it's part of some ancient recurring cycle of judgment and perhaps renewal, but in this case, a renewal of injustice. It's fated to happen again and again.
The indictment itself seems to explicitly state the theme of doubling. It's incompatibly framed. He's charged on both accounts, and then it says, the one fellow's fesh being the other fellow's person.
That line is the absolute key, isn't it? It tells you exactly what's going on structurally. A fetch in Irish folklore or the filja in Norse myths is your double, your spectral twin. Seeing your fetch was often considered an omen of death.
So Joyce is flat out telling us, Festy King is HCE's fetch. He's the ghost, the double, who has to take the punishment, maybe even the metaphorical death sentence, for HCE's original crime.
Precisely. It confirms King is the scapegoat, the shadow self.
And the actual charges against King. Did they connect back to HCE's act at Buckbridge?
Perfectly. They mirror it, but in a sort of low-life, distorted way. The two counts are, first, flying cushots out of his overalls.
Flying pigeons. Or stealing coal.
Yeah, flying cushots could be slang for stealing coal, maybe pigeons. It marks King as a petty thief, a crime driven by poverty. But the second count is the direct echo, making fesses amongst his forces on the field.
Fesses? French for buttocks, or feces.
Could be either or both. So King is accused of exposing his buttocks, or more likely, defecating in public, making fesses, amongst his forces, amidst his trousers, or perhaps amidst troops, on the field. It's the exact same public scatological offense that HCE committed, just described in slightly different, perhaps more vulgar terms.
The system has identified the crime, but it's pinned it on the wrong man, or rather the convenient man.
The convenient man. The expendable man, the act itself, the public offense, the stain on the city's reputation needs to be prosecuted. But HCE is too central, too slippery. So King, the poor guy from the west of Ireland, marked by historical injustice, becomes the perfect substitute.
How does King look when he appears in court? The description is pretty vivid. Soaked in methylated spirits, in dry dock, patently ambrosialized.
It paints a picture of utter dereliction, doesn't it? Methylated spirits, meths, that's cheap. Industrial alcohol, highly toxic, shapes his poverty, his desperation. In dry dock usually means a ship being repaired or someone unemployed or in hospital. Here it clearly means the prisoner's dock. Stuck.
And ambrosia-realized. Drunk, obviously, but...
Drunk, yes, but the word itself is so grandiose. Ambrosia is the food of the gods. And it hints at Ambrosius Aurelianus, that legendary Romano-British leader who fought the Saxons. So King is presented as this drunken wreck, but beneath the surface there's this echo of a mythical hero, a defender against invaders, a degraded champion.
His clothes also seem to carry meaning. A curse's corduroy caricature.
Right, corduroy, that's the classic fabric of the working class, the peasantry. Curse was a known Dublin tailor, but calling it a caricature suggests it's ill-fitting, maybe mocking. And those initials, KKK.
You can't miss those.
No. Joyce puts them right there. It immediately evokes conspiracy. secret societies, perhaps the Ku Klux Klan, even if incongruously. It marks King as somehow involved in dangerous underground movements, even while looking pathetic. He's wearing 7 ragged items, including policeman's corkscrew trousers, which sounds deliberately comical and ill-fitting.
And there's even a specific historical rumor woven into his clothing. Something about a fight shirt.
Yes, this seems to be a veiled reference to Charles Stewart Parnell, the dominant figure in Irish politics in the late 19th century. There was a huge scandal involving his affair with Catherine O'Shea. A rumor, likely false but widely circulated, claimed Parnell had to escape her husband's house down a fire escape wearing only his nightshirt.
So King's ragged shirt connects him to Parnell's fall from grace.
It seems so. His clothes, described as century makes, bespokes, tailor-made, but from the Isle of Man perhaps, and linked to cemeteries again, have been deliberately ripped up in prison. It symbolizes not just his own poverty, but maybe the shredding of Irish political hopes, the public humiliation of its leaders like Parnell.
Okay, so this ragged, historically burdened figure gets into the witness box. He testifies in the Royal Irish vocabulary.
Which straight away brings back the Maamtrasna parallel, the language barrier. He's speaking Irish, or maybe Hiberno-English, thick with Irish idioms, and his words are described as floors of sparse.
Flowers of speech, but mixed with fluorspar, a mineral.
Exactly. It suggests his testimony is maybe beautiful in its own way, but also hard, crystalline, perhaps incomprehensible, or even worthless to the court. His actual defense is all about denying the stains on his clothes are from gunpowder.
Right, he denies the paterchag martin tripeside suet and all the sulfate of copperas, which are
Components of black powder, saltpeter, paterchag martin, sulfur, suet, and copperas, iron or copper sulfate. He's saying, nope, not gunpowder.
So what does he say caused the stains?
His story is completely outlandish. He claims the stains just sort of crystallized and fell off unaccountably, like minerals, alum, or fluorspar, and this happened while he was trying to stick fire to himself.
Set himself on fire,
Yeah.
or just light something.
Probably just trying to light a pipe or a small fire with a fire stick, like a match or flint. He says he was soaking wet from cold rain, but maybe a pun on old Queen Victoria, and all he wanted was a drink, a pipkin of malt.
So his defense is basically, I wasn't making bombs or shooting guns. I was just cold, wet, and trying to get warm and have a drink, and these weird stains just appeared.
Pretty much. It's a plea of poverty, desperation, and misunderstanding, wrapped up in deliberately obscure language and slightly fantastical chemistry. It's designed to confuse, perhaps, rather than convince.
How does the prosecution react? PC Robert, police constable Robert, presumably.
The police constable completely ignores King's bizarre mineralogy defense. Instead, the Crown focuses on proving King as a master of disguise, a known troublemaker using aliases.
Why that approach?
Because it fits the stereotype, they can't engage with King's chaotic story, so they construct their own narrative. He's inherently criminal. They list his aliases. King, alias Crowbar.
Crowbar. Another Parnell link.
Yes, Parnell was sometimes called the Crowbar King after an incident involving a raid on a newspaper office. So King is being linked to political agitation again, and alias Malachy.
Malachy, like the Irish High King.
Seems so. King Malachy II. So the prosecution is painting him as simultaneously a king, a revolutionary agitator, Crowbar, and the actual defendant, King. A figure of historical weight disguised as a tramp.
And the disguise itself, impersonating a climbing boy.
A chimney sweep. And how did he allegedly disguise himself? By rubbing alluvial peatsmore o'er his face.
Peat, tar, blacking his face.
Exactly. Alluvial deposits, peatmore. It implies he covered his face in black stuff. And this is the most chilling echo of Maamtrasna. Contemporary accounts of the Maamtrasna murders often mention that the attackers had blackened their faces with soot to avoid being identified.
So the prosecution is essentially accusing King of using the same tactic as the Maamtrasna murderers.
It seems Joyce is making that connection explicit. The police case isn't about finding the truth of this incident. It's about fitting King into a pre-existing narrative of Irish criminality, using details lifted directly from that earlier tragic case. It's profiling, based on historical trauma.
The police evidence seems completely nonsensical after that. Tracking him using names from a phone book spelled backwards, Tyking Fest, and rap work.
It's pure bureaucratic absurdity, isn't it? Festy King and Crowbar backwards. They claim they found these aliases in a telephone book and traced him to a fair in Mudford, maybe a real place, maybe just Muddy Ford with an unlicensed pedigree pig and a hyacinth.
A pig and a flower. This feels like it's spiraling into total nonsense.
It is. The trial dissolves into this strange, almost surreal digression about agriculture and economics.
But there's some mythic stuff mixed in first. About a journey.
Yes, a brief, dense passage that seems to invoke epic journeys. It mentions landing a matched camel and ass, graybeard and suckling, priest and pauper. That phrasing strongly echoes the Bible, specifically II Samuel 15.3, where God commands Saul to utterly destroy the Amalekites, sparing nothing.
That's pretty brutal. How does it connect?
It might link to the foundational myths of Ireland, the Milesian invasion tales of conquest, displacement, total war. It suggests the whole agricultural scene, the whole basis of Irish society, is founded on some ancient violent struggle for land. The journey took 999 years, adding to the mythic feel.
Okay, so after that mythic overture, we get to the actual gathering. Convened by Irish agricultural and pre-pastoral organizations. That sounds satirical.
Highly satirical, agricultural, pre-pastoral.
Yeah.
Hurricane organizations. It captures the often chaotic and contentious nature of Irish agrarian politics and societies, and their goal is very specific, very economic.
To help the Irish muck pig to look his brother Dane in the face.
This is spot on for the period. There was intense competition between the Irish pig bacon industry and the incredibly successful, highly organized Danish bacon industry, which dominated the British market. So the goal of these Irish organizations is economic parity for the Irish pig farmer, the muck, to be able to compete on equal terms with the Danish farmer.
The pig is central here, but it's also noted as a taboo animal.
Yes, the text points out the irony. The pig, the source of livelihood, is taboo for Jews and Muslims, and sometimes viewed negatively by Christians, who might be metaphorically present in this mixed gathering. It highlights the complex role of this animal in the economy and culture.
And what happens to this crucial pig? The gentleman ratepayer who pays the rent.
In this farcical conclusion, the pig gets sold off by the pikey, which could mean Festy King himself, or just a generic tramp figure. He sells the source of income, the rent payer.
Why? What triggers the sale?
This is where it gets truly bizarre. Apparently, Francie's sister ate part of the pig's sty.
Fancy.
Yeah,
Like St. Francis, the patron saint of animals.
seems likely. So St. Francis's sister, maybe the sow herself, the female animal, ate a whole side of the animal's sty. The pig ate its own house. Or maybe even a side of bacon. It happened on a struggle street, Quista Troia.
Here is Troy. But Troy in Italian also means
A sow. Or less flatteringly, a whore. So the location is literally, here's the sow whore, linking the pig's self-destructive act, eating its home bacon, to the epic destruction of Troy. It's chaos, self-consumption.
and the money from selling the pig.
It goes to pay off 6 doubloons, 15 arrears of his, the villain's not the rumbler's rent. Just completely nonsensical accounting, farcical debt, farcical payment. The villain is presumably King, the scapegoat, whose debts are settled by selling the pig that ate its own sty in a place called Troyso Town. It's the final, chaotic unraveling of the trial narrative into economic absurdity. Justice isn't served, debt is just shuffled around nonsensically.
Wow, okay, that was a journey.
Yeah.
From near assassination to faulty firearms to public defecation to Maamtrasna to pig economics. Let's try and pull the threads together. What do these pages really show us about Joyce's method and message here?
Well, I think what we've really extracted is just how much historical weight Joyce packs into every line. You can't understand Festy King's trial without knowing about Maamtrasna. You can't get the Peter the Painter reference without knowing about Sydney Street. It demands that context.
And structurally, the key thing seems to be the scapegoat mechanism.
Absolutely. We see it laid bare. HCE commits the private, shameful act near Butt Bridge. The system requires a public reckoning. Festy King, the fetch, is produced specifically to absorb that public condemnation for a crime that mirrors HCE's perfectly. Every detail about Kin, his poverty, his language, his historical baggage, makes him the ideal candidate to take the fall.
And the constant switching between high concepts and low reality is relentless, isn't it?
Completely. You have Roman law terms, acta legitima, calends of Mars, right next to taking a dump, drinking meths, wearing rags. It collapses those distinctions. The respectable citizen HCE and the derelict Festy King are shown to be fundamentally linked, just playing different roles in the same cycle of hidden guilt and public accusation.
So the ultimate message seems to be that justice in this world is elusive, that truth gets completely fragmented.
I think so. The sources here suggest that for Joyce, the labels victim, perpetrator, crime itself are almost interchangeable. They shift, they double back. HCE is only innocent in this scene because Festy King becomes guilty. The trial doesn't uncover truth, it just finds a socially convenient place to dump the blame. It's lost in translation, literally and figuratively.
Which leaves us with a pretty unsettling thought about how these systems work, both in the book and maybe outside it.
It really does. And it brings us to that final question, something for you, the listener, to really mull over. If the whole point of the legal process, as shown here, isn't about finding truth, but about finding a convenient scapegoat, a Festy King, to absorb public shame, well, how often do we do that ourselves? In our own lives, in society. When we judge someone else, point the finger. Are we ever just prosecuting our own shadows, avoiding looking at what we might have done down by our own bridge? Joyce seems to suggest those lines between guilt and innocence, accuser and accused, are much blurrier, much more self-serving than we like to think.